80. Samyutta Nikaya 12.38. Discourse on Thought. The origin is in Sravasti. Monks, when there are thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, this becomes the object for the establishment of consciousness. When there is an object, consciousness has a support. When consciousness is established and grows, there is the production of future rebirth. When there is future rebirth, there will be future birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus is the origin of this entire mass of suffering. Monks, even if there are no thoughts and no plans, but if there are latent tendencies, this also becomes the object for the establishment of consciousness. When there is an object, consciousness has a support. When consciousness is established and grows, there is the production of future rebirth. When there is future rebirth, there will be future birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus is the origin of this entire mass of suffering. However, monks, when there are no thoughts, no plans, and no latent tendencies, there is no object for the establishment of consciousness. When there is no object, consciousness has no support. When consciousness is not established and does not grow, there is no production of future rebirth. When there is no future rebirth, future birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Thus is the cessation of this entire mass of suffering. This is the 8th discourse. This discourse elaborates on 1. The relationship between consciousness and rebirth. Thoughts, plans, latent tendencies. How these three influence the continuation and rebirth of consciousness. 2. 3 levels of mental activity. Conscious thinking, conscious planning, subconscious tendencies. Any of these levels of activity can lead to rebirth. 3. The path to liberation. Only when all 3 levels completely cease can one truly break the cycle of rebirth and reach the cessation of suffering. This teaching tells us that to achieve true liberation, we must not only control surface thoughts and behaviors, but also purify the deepest latent tendencies. This provides important guidance for understanding the workings of consciousness and the direction of practice. Let me analyze this discourse in depth for you. The relationship between consciousness and rebirth. This discourse reveals the close relationship between consciousness and rebirth. Consciousness refers to our mind, which is the basis of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Rebirth refers to the cycle of our life process, including birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. The discourse points out that when we have thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, these become the objects for the establishment of consciousness. The object is the support for consciousness, the focus of consciousness. When consciousness has an object, it has support, and consciousness will be established and grow. This means that when we have thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, our consciousness will be influenced by these things, leading us into the cycle of rebirth. 3 levels of mental activity. The discourse mentions 3 levels of mental activity. 1. Conscious thinking. These are our conscious thoughts and plans. 2. Conscious planning. These are our conscious decisions and actions. 3. Subconscious tendencies. These are our habits and tendencies in the subconscious. Any level of activity can lead to rebirth. This means that even if we are not aware of our thoughts and behaviors, we may still be influenced by the subconscious, leading us into the cycle of rebirth. The path to liberation. The discourse points out that only when all 3 levels completely cease can one truly break the cycle of rebirth and reach the cessation of suffering. This means that to achieve true liberation, we need to 1. Control surface thoughts and behaviors. 2. Purify the deepest latent tendencies. This provides important guidance for understanding the workings of consciousness and the direction of practice. Food for thought. This discourse tells us that the relationship between consciousness and rebirth is very close. Our thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies can all lead us into the cycle of rebirth. To achieve true liberation, we need to control surface thoughts and behaviors, and more importantly, purify the deepest latent tendencies. This discourse also reminds us that rebirth is the cycle of our life process, including birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. To achieve true liberation, we need to break the cycle of rebirth and reach the cessation of suffering. This discourse provides important guidance for the direction of our practice. We need to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, and strive to control and purify them to achieve true liberation. The awakening of wisdom. This discourse awakens our wisdom, allowing us to understand the relationship between consciousness and rebirth, and also making us aware of the importance of achieving true liberation. We need to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, and strive to control and purify them to achieve true liberation. This discourse also makes us aware that rebirth is the cycle of our life process, including birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. To achieve true liberation, we need to break the cycle of rebirth and reach the cessation of suffering. This discourse provides important guidance for our practice, encouraging us to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and latent tendencies, and strive to control and purify them to achieve true liberation. Let me interpret this discourse from the perspective of wisdom and the essence of life. The source of life, the mystery of consciousness. This discourse reveals the fundamental mechanism of life's flow, the operating principle of consciousness. It is like a deep algorithm of cosmic life, revealing the inner logic of the generation of suffering and liberation. The generation mechanism of consciousness. 1. The constituent elements of consciousness. Thoughts, surface consciousness. Plans, conscious intentions. Latent tendencies, deep psychological imprints. These three constitute the inner driving force for the continuation of life, like seeds, soil, and nutrients, jointly nurturing the cycle of life. 2. The nature of rebirth. Rebirth is not an external mechanical cycle, but a continuous projection of inner consciousness. Every thought, every hidden tendency can become the seed of a new life. Key insight: the root of suffering is in the mind, and liberation is also in the mind. 3. The profound philosophy of the path to liberation. True liberation is not just stopping thinking, but reaching a state of awareness that transcends thinking. No thoughts, not controlled by thoughts. No plans, not driven by purposes. No latent tendencies. The mind is thoroughly clear. This is a highly awakened state, transcending the limitations of individual consciousness. Thought-provoking wisdom revelations. 1. Life is a constantly flowing process of consciousness. 2. Suffering originates from attachment and ignorance. 3. Liberation lies in awareness, not suppression. 4. Every moment is an opportunity for new choices. The poetic philosophy of life. Imagine life as a river. Thoughts are the waves on the surface. Plans are the direction of the river. Latent tendencies are the undercurrents at the bottom. True wisdom is to become the consciousness observing this river, neither intervening nor attaching. Practical wisdom. The core of practice is not to eliminate thoughts, but to maintain awareness, not identify with thoughts. Allow thoughts to flow naturally. Maintain inner tranquility. This discourse is not only a Buddhist teaching, but also a profound philosophical poem about consciousness, life, and liberation. It invites us to go beyond the surface and touch the deepest mysteries of life. Every reading is a pilgrimage of the soul. Every contemplation is a possibility of awakening.